Mind Trigger: 27 Psychological Tactics that Make People Do Exactly What You Want. Introduction: Why most people never realize they're being controlled. There is something nobody wants to admit out loud. Every single day, over breakfast, at work, in the store, lying next to the person you love, you're being influenced, directed, shaped, and you have absolutely no idea it's happening. Not because you're weak, not because you're naive, but because the human brain was never designed to detect this. It was designed to survive. And survival, for millions of years, meant following patterns, trusting the tribe, obeying the signals of status and authority. Those ancient wiring diagrams are still running inside your skull right now. And the people who understand that, really understand it, can walk into any room and quietly bend it to their will. This book is about those people, and after you read it, it will be about you. Let me tell you about a moment that changed how I see everything. A friend of mine, smart, educated, skeptical, bought a car he never intended to buy. He walked into the dealership to just look. He left 4 hours later, $34,000 lighter, driving something he didn't need, didn't plan for, and couldn't quite explain why he chose. When I asked him what happened, he shrugged. The salesman was just really good. That's what we say when we can't explain it. He was just really good. As if charm is some mystical force. As if persuasion is magic. It isn't. It's a system. A set of specific, learnable, repeatable triggers. And once you know them, you will never unsee them again. You'll feel them being used on you. You'll recognize them in conversations, in advertising, in politics, in relationships. And more importantly, you will know exactly how to use them yourself. The uncomfortable truth about human behavior. Here is something the self-help industry doesn't like to say. Most of your decisions aren't really yours. Studies in behavioral psychology consistently show that the vast majority of human decisions are made unconsciously, then rationalized after the fact. You don't choose, you react. Your brain constructs a story about why you did something after the decision is already made, and then presents that story to your conscious mind as if it were the truth. This means the battlefield of influence isn't the conscious mind. It's the space underneath, the primal, emotional, pattern-seeking machinery that runs 24 hours a day without your permission. The greatest manipulators in history understood this intuitively. Dictators, cult leaders, master salespeople, seducers, lawyers. The best of them were not smarter than their targets. They simply understood one thing that their targets did not. People respond to triggers, not to logic. Logic is slow. It requires effort. It asks questions. But a trigger bypasses all of that. It goes straight to the part of the brain that acts first and asks questions later, if it asks them at all. What this book is, and what it isn't. This is not a book about manipulation for its own sake. It is not a blueprint for exploitation. At the end of this book, you will find a chapter called The Ethical Line, and I mean every word of it. But I also refuse to pretend that these tactics don't exist. They do. They're being used right now. On you, on your children, on your colleagues and your clients. The only question is whether you will remain blind to them, or whether you will learn to see. Because here's the real power dynamic of the modern world. Those who understand influence shape reality. Those who don't understand it become part of someone else's reality. This book is your choice to stop being the latter. How to read this book. The book is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 is about reading people before you speak. You cannot influence what you cannot understand. These 9 tactics will teach you to see the invisible, the signals people send without knowing they send them, the needs they carry without knowing they carry them. Part 2 is about controlling the conversation, not dominating it, controlling it, which is far more subtle, far more powerful, and far more invisible. By the time someone realizes a conversation has gone exactly where you needed it to go, it's already over. Part 3 is about making them act without knowing why. These are the deepest tactics, the ones that operate on pure instinct and emotion, the ones that make a person feel like a decision was entirely their own, when in fact you built every step of the road they walked down. Each chapter follows the same structure. What it is, a clean, honest definition, the psychology behind it, why the human brain is vulnerable to these, a real-life example, vivid, concrete, something you'll recognize how to use it, step by step, no vagueness how to defend against it, because knowledge is only power if it goes both ways. Read carefully, read slowly, and pay attention to the moments when something feels uncomfortably familiar, because those are the moments you're learning something real. Part 1. Reading people before you speak. Tactics 1 to 9. Before you can move someone, you have to understand what moves them. Part 1 is about developing the most dangerous skill in any room, the ability to read a person before a single word leaves your mouth. Status, fear, need, desire, shame. These are the levers. These chapters will show you where they are hidden. Tactic number 1, the hunger map. Find what someone desperately needs, and you have found your key. What it is? Every person you will ever meet is walking around with an invisible list of unmet needs. Not surface-level wants, not, "I'd like a coffee," but deep, aching psychological hungers. The need to be seen, to be respected, to feel safe, to feel significant, to feel loved. The hunger map is the practice of identifying exactly which need is loudest in a person at this moment in time. Once you find it, you don't need tricks. You simply become the person who feeds that hunger, and they will follow you anywhere. The psychology behind it. Abraham Maslow made the hierarchy famous, but he only told half the story. The half that matters for influence isn't the pyramid, it's the gap. Human beings are not motivated by what they have. They are motivated obsessively, constantly, often irrationally, by what they lack. A person who feels invisible at home will sell their loyalty cheaply to anyone who makes them feel seen. A person who grew up poor will make decisions in adulthood that a financially secure person would consider baffling, because they are not making those decisions in the present. They are making them in the shadow of their past hunger. The brain's reward system is wired to pursue relief from pain more aggressively than it pursues pleasure. This means that a person's deepest unmet need isn't just a preference. It's a wound, and wounds, by their very nature, draw attention. They pull behavior toward them like a magnet. When you locate someone's hunger, you locate the gravitational center of their decision-making. Everything else is just surface. Real-life example. Marcus had been trying to close a deal with a potential business partner for 3 months. The man, Daniel, was successful, smart, and seemingly had no obvious pressure points. Marcus had tried price negotiations, logic, data. Nothing moved him. Then, at a dinner, Marcus paid attention for the first time, not to what Daniel said, but to how he said it. Every time Daniel spoke, he glanced around the table to see if people were listening. He dropped the names of influential people he knew. He corrected minor factual errors other people made. Not aggressively, but precisely. He steered the conversation back to himself with impressive consistency. Marcus recognized it immediately once he saw it. Daniel was starving for respect. Not money, not opportunity. He needed to feel like the most important person in the room. The next meeting, Marcus restructured everything. He opened by asking Daniel's opinion, genuinely, specifically, on a complex industry problem. He listened with full attention. He said, in front of 2 colleagues, "I don't think anyone understands this market the way Daniel does." The deal was signed within the week. Daniel didn't change. His hunger was always there. Marcus simply learned to read the map, how to use it, step by step. Step 1. Observe before you engage. Give yourself the first 5 to 10 minutes of any interaction as pure intelligence gathering. Ask yourself, what does this person seem to be seeking right now? Validation? Control? Safety? Connection? Watch their behavior. not just their words. Step 2. Listen for the emotional undercurrent. People rarely announce their needs directly. Instead, they leak them. They emphasize certain topics. They become animated or defensive at specific moments. They repeat certain themes. Every repetition is a signal. Every defensiveness is a wound. Step 3. Test your hypothesis gently. Once you think you've identified the hunger, test it. Give a small, low-stakes offering. A compliment in the area of their perceived need, a small acknowledgement of their expertise or value, and watch the reaction. If they light up, you found it. Step 4. Become the source. Don't flood them with it. Don't become obvious, but consistently position yourself as the person who reliably satisfies that need. Recognition, if that's their hunger. Safety and certainty, if that's their fear. Belonging, if that's their wound. You are not manipulating their character. You are speaking directly to their deepest truth. Step 5. Protect the source. Once someone associates you with the relief of their deepest hunger, they will protect that association. This is not exploitation, it is attunement. But understand, if you ever remove that nourishment abruptly, the reaction will be fierce. Handle with care. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Ask yourself, why does this person make me feel so uniquely understood? Genuine connection develops slowly and naturally. If someone seems to zero in on your exact needs suspiciously fast, if they appear to know you better than people who've known you for years, pause. Ask whether they're satisfying something real or whether they have simply located a wound and are pressing on it skillfully. Approval that arrives too perfectly, too quickly, is rarely unconditional. Find out what they want from you before you give them what they seem to already know you need. Tactic number 2, the mask reader. See the person behind the performance. What it is. Every person you meet is wearing a mask, not out of dishonesty, out of survival. We learn very early in life that certain versions of ourselves are rewarded and others are punished, so we build a public face. Confident, agreeable, strong, calm, competent, whatever the world seemed to demand. The mask reader is the ability to see through that performance to the real person operating underneath it. Because the real person is who you need to reach. The mask will never give you what you want. The psychology behind it. Carl Jung called it the persona, the social face we wear to navigate the world. He also warned that the more perfectly someone maintains their persona, the more powerfully the opposite is operating in the shadow. The loud, brash man is almost always compensating for profound insecurity. The relentlessly cheerful woman is often exhausted by emotions she's never allowed herself to express. The controlled, precise executive is frequently terrified of chaos in his personal life. The person who never asks for help is drowning in the need for it. This is not cynicism. This is psychology. The mask is not a lie. It is a strategy. And like all strategies, it reveals the problem it was designed to solve. When you learn to read what the mask is protecting, you understand the person wearing it with a depth that most people, including their closest friends, never achieve. And depth of understanding is the foundation of all influence. Real-life example. Elena was a new manager inheriting a difficult team. One member, Brett, was immediately hostile. He challenged her in meetings, dismissed her ideas, and made subtle jokes at her expense in front of colleagues. Everything about him said, "I don't respect you, and I never will." A less skilled reader would have escalated, asserted authority, pushed back harder, or attempted to go around him. Elena did something different. She watched Brett in other contexts, and she noticed whenever his ideas were challenged, even mildly, even constructively, he shut down completely. His jaw tightened. He gave one-word answers for the rest of the meeting. He looked, for just a moment, like a much younger person. She realized the hostility wasn't about her at all. Brett's mask The aggressive, dominant persona was protecting something fragile underneath, a terror of being seen as incompetent, of being dismissed. In their next one-on-one, Elena didn't confront his behavior. Instead, she said, "Brett, I want to be direct with you. I think you have insights on this team that nobody else has. I don't want those to get lost in the transition. Can you walk me through how you see things?" He talked for 40 minutes, and he never challenged her publicly again. She didn't defeat his mask. She made wearing it unnecessary. How to use it? Step by step. Step 1. Look for the exaggeration. The mask is always an exaggeration of something. Extreme toughness, extreme cheerfulness, extreme competence, extreme humility. Whatever is dialed up past natural, that is the performance. Behind it is the opposite. Step 2. Watch the moments the mask slips. Stress, fatigue, surprise, and genuine connection are mask dissolvers. Pay close attention when someone is caught off guard or when they are at ease. Those moments reveal the actual person. Step 3. Speak to the shadow, not the performance. Once you understand what the mask is hiding, address it gently, indirectly. Don't name it out loud. Simply behave in a way that says, "I see you," not the version you perform, the real one. And that version is safe here. Step 4. Never attack the mask. If you confront someone's persona directly, call them fake, call out the gap between their performance and their reality, you will trigger the most defensive version of them. The mask exists for protection. Attack it, and you attack their survival strategy. They will never forgive you for it. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Be cautious of people who seem to see through you with uncanny accuracy early in a relationship. The feeling of being deeply understood is intoxicating. It creates instant trust and loyalty. But ask yourself, what do they want from the person they claim to see? A skilled reader of masks doesn't always use that information for your benefit. They may simply be locating the most efficient path to your compliance. Tactic number 3, the emotional thermometer. Read the room before you open your mouth. What it is, before you speak a single word, the emotional temperature of every room and every person in it is already set. The emotional thermometer is the ability to read that temperature accurately and instantly. Who is open, who is closed, who is afraid, who is bored, who is hungry for something, who is on edge. It is the skill of entering a conversation with a perfect read of where people already are, so you can meet them there, rather than crashing into a wall you didn't see coming. The psychology behind it. Emotions are not just feelings. They are states, and states determine what information a person can receive. A person in a defensive state literally processes language differently than a person in an open state. Neuroscience shows that fear and stress narrow cognitive focus. People in these states have reduced capacity for nuance, creativity, and trust. They see threat everywhere. A person in a positive, relaxed, curious emotional state is exponentially more persuadable, more open to new ideas, and more generous in their interpretation of what you say. This means that the timing of influence, delivering your message when someone is in the right state to receive it, is as important as the message itself. The most perfectly crafted argument, delivered to someone in the wrong emotional state, will fail. A simple, honest request, delivered to someone in exactly the right state, can achieve the impossible. The thermometer tells you which situation you're in before you commit to either one. Real-life example. Sarah had been preparing for weeks to ask her director for a promotion. She had the data, the accomplishments, the comparison to her peers. She was ready. She walked into his office at 2 p.m. on a Thursday, the time they'd agreed. The moment she stepped in, she clocked it. He was on his third cup of coffee, a stack of papers in front of him, his face tight. His assistant had mentioned on the way in that there was a budget review that afternoon. A less aware person would have launched into the prepared speech. Sarah sat down, looked at him genuinely, and said, "You look slammed. Do you want to reschedule this? I want to have your actual attention when we talk." He looked up, surprised. No, I can do this. I'd rather do it when you're not fighting four things at once." Next week, they rescheduled. She came back on a Tuesday morning. His assistant had confirmed it was a calm week. He was relaxed, laughing about something when she walked in. She made her case. He approved it on the spot. Same argument, different temperature, completely different outcome. How to use it? Step by step. Step 1. Pause before you enter. Develop the habit of taking 10 seconds before walking into any important conversation to observe and orient. Don't start talking immediately. Let the room tell you where it is. Step 2. Read the body first. Crossed arms, tight jaw, short responses, avoidance of eye contact. These are cold temperature signals. Open posture, relaxed face, sustained eye contact, spontaneous humor. These are warm signals. Trust the body over the words. Step 3. Ask yourself, open or closed? It's actually that simple as a first read. Is this person, right now, in a state where they can receive what I'm about to say? If yes, proceed. If no, your first job is to change the temperature, not to deliver your message. Step 4. Change the temperature if needed. A genuine compliment, a shared laugh, removing a source of stress, acknowledging what they're dealing with. These are temperature-raising tools. You don't need to be artificial. You simply need to be present enough to recognize that this person isn't ready, and human enough to respond to that reality first. Step 5. Strike when the temperature is right. The right moment feels like a natural opening. The person is engaged, relaxed, and present. That is when your words carry maximum weight. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Notice when people seem to catch you at your most vulnerable moments to make requests or proposals. Notice when someone waits, consciously or not, until you're in a good mood, feeling generous or feeling guilty, and then makes their ask. The emotional window is real. Learn to recognize when yours is being exploited by asking, "Would I make this same decision on a neutral day, in a neutral state?" Tactic number 4. The status scan. Know where everyone stands before the game begins. What is? In every group of human beings, every office, every family, every dinner party, there is a status hierarchy. It may be invisible. It may be unspoken. It is never absent. The status scan is the ability to read the hierarchy accurately within minutes of entering a room. Who holds real power? Who thinks they hold power? Who defers to whom? And, most importantly, who is desperate to move up? Understanding the status map of any environment tells you who to approach, how to approach them, and what they need from you. The psychology behind it. Status is one of the most primal human concerns. Research in neuroscience shows that perceived status changes are processed in the same part of the brain as physical threats and rewards. A loss of status activates the same neural response as physical pain. A gain in status triggers the same reward circuitry as food or sex. This means status isn't a social game. It's a survival signal. And people will do extraordinary things, sacrifice money, relationships, integrity, to protect or elevate their perceived position in a hierarchy. The person who can read the status map accurately holds a tremendous advantage. They know who the real decision maker is, which is often not the person with the biggest title. They know who is insecure about their position and therefore volatile. They know who is comfortable enough with their status to be generous. They know exactly where to place themselves in the hierarchy to achieve what they need. Real life example. James walked into a client meeting to pitch his firm's services. There were 5 people across the table. The most senior-looking man, gray hair, expensive suit, head of the table, was named Richard. Richard was clearly the official leader. But James watched carefully in the first 3 minutes. When a point was made, several people's eyes flicked, briefly, almost imperceptibly, toward a quiet woman on the left side of the table. Not to Richard, to her. When she nodded slightly, the energy in the room relaxed. When she raised an eyebrow, people shifted. Her name was Claire. Her title was Director of Strategy, technically below Richard's. But her actual status in that room was undisputed. James made sure to direct key parts of his presentation to Claire. He asked for her perspective specifically. He acknowledged a concern she raised as the most important question on the table. Richard liked the pitch, but Claire championed it internally afterward. The contract came through in 2 weeks. How to use it, step by step. Step 1. Ignore titles initially. Titles tell you the official hierarchy. The status scan reveals the real one. They are often different, sometimes dramatically so. Step 2. Watch the eyes. In a group, people's eyes involuntarily seek out whoever they consider most important when something uncertain is said. Track the eye movements for the first few minutes. The person that most eyes drift toward is the real power node. Step 3. Watch who speaks last. High-status individuals often let others speak first. They don't need to prove themselves. When they do speak, the room quiets. Low-status individuals often speak first and loudest. They're compensating. Step 4. Watch who is deferred to versus who defers. Who do people ask for validation? Who checks whether the room agrees with them? The person being checked with holds the actual power. Step 5. Position yourself strategically. Once you know the map, decide where you want to place yourself within it. Align with the real power, not just the official one. And remember, the fastest way to raise your own status in a room is to be the one who accurately recognizes the status of others, because that itself is a signal of social intelligence, which everyone around the table respects. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Pay attention to people who seem to study the room before they engage. Watch for those who redirect their attention, shifting away from the official authority toward whoever has the actual influence, very quickly and smoothly. This is a skilled operator at work. Also be wary if you suspect someone is deliberately using your status hunger against you, elevating you publicly in ways that make you feel obligated to return the favor. Tactic number 5. The fear frequency. Detect what someone is most afraid of losing. What is? Fear is the most powerful motivator on earth. Not greed, not ambition, not love, fear. Specifically, the fear of loss. The fear frequency is the practice of identifying what a person is most terrified of losing: their reputation, their security, their relationships, their relevance, their control, and understanding how that fear shapes every decision they make. You don't have to threaten it. You simply have to know it's there. The psychology behind it. Loss aversion is one of the most replicated findings in behavioral psychology. Research pioneered by Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky demonstrated that the pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. This isn't a personality flaw. It is a fundamental feature of human cognition. The brain weights potential losses far more heavily than potential gains. What this means in practice: if you can frame your message in terms of what someone stands to lose by not acting, you will move them far more effectively than if you focus on what they stand to gain. But it goes deeper than framing. The person who knows what specifically you are afraid of losing holds enormous power over your behavior, because they can invoke that fear without even naming it, simply by making you aware, consciously or unconsciously, that it's at risk. Real-life example. 2 salespeople were pitching the same software product to the same business owner, Gary. The first salesperson talked about efficiency gains, growth potential, and competitive advantage. He showed ROI projections. Gary was politely interested and said he'd think about it. The second salesperson had done her homework. She knew Gary's biggest competitor had just adopted a similar platform. She opened with this: "Gary, I'm going to be honest with you. I looked at your market last week. 3 of your competitors are already running systems like this. You're not yet. I don't know how much runway you have before you start feeling it, but I'd rather you hear this from me than from your Q4 numbers. Gary signed a contract that afternoon. The first salesperson appealed to Gary's ambition. The second spoke directly to his fear of falling behind, of losing the position he had spent 20 years building. Same product, completely different lever. How to use it, step by step. Step 1. Listen for what they protect most obsessively. People talk most about what they fear losing. The executive who brings up his reputation unprompted. The parent who circles back to the topic of their children's safety in every conversation. The entrepreneur who can't stop mentioning cash flow. The fear is almost always hiding inside the obsession. Step 2. Notice what makes them defensive. Touch someone's fear frequency, even accidentally, and they react with disproportionate defensiveness. A reaction that seems too large for the stimulus is almost always protecting something important. Note it, don't press, but remember it. Step 3. Frame, don't threaten. The most powerful application of the fear frequency is framing, presenting choices in terms of what will be lost, not what will be gained. You could gain X is weaker than without this, you risk losing Y. This is true even when X and Y are objectively equivalent. Step 4. Use the fear as a compass, not a weapon. The goal is not to terrorize someone into compliance. It is to help them understand the genuine stakes of an action and to position your offer as the relief from that risk. When done honestly, this is not manipulation. It is clarity. The line is thin, but it exists. Warning. How to recognize when it's used against you. Become deeply suspicious of urgency. Urgency is almost always a fear activation tool. Limited time offer. Your competitors are already moving. You'll lose your chance. When someone is generating artificial urgency around a decision, they are attempting to activate your fear of loss to short-circuit your rational evaluation. Slow down. Urgency imposed from outside is rarely as real as it is presented. Ask, is this actually urgent, or is someone making it feel urgent? Tactic number 6, the silent tell. What they don't say is the real message. What it is, the human body does not lie, or rather, it lies very badly. While the conscious mind crafts careful words, the body is constantly broadcasting a second, competing signal, the real emotional state underneath. The silent tell is the practice of reading nonverbal communication, posture, microexpressions, breathing patterns, hand behavior, foot direction, blinking, to understand what someone is actually experiencing in the moments their words are saying something different. The psychology behind it. The body's nonverbal signals are controlled by the limbic system, the ancient, emotional brain that operates far faster than conscious thought. When someone experiences an emotion, the limbic system reacts in milliseconds. The conscious mind catches up a fraction of a second later and begins the process of deciding what to say about that emotion. But by then, the body has already responded. This is why micro-expressions, fleeting emotional expressions that cross the face in under a quarter of a second, are so revealing. They are the limbic system's uncensored report. Trained observers can catch expressions of contempt, fear, disgust, or joy that the person's conscious mind has already decided to conceal. You don't need to be a trained FBI agent to use this. You simply need to develop the habit of watching what happens in the first instant before the person decides how to respond, because that instant contains the truth. Real-life example. During a negotiation, David made an offer to his counterpart, Maria. She smiled warmly and said, "That's a very interesting proposal. We'll definitely consider it." Everything about her words said, "We might be on board." But David had been watching. In the quarter second before the smile, something else had crossed Maria's face, a brief, almost invisible tightening around the eyes. Not surprise. not calculation. Contempt, the kind of expression that says, "This offer is insulting." If David had taken her words at face value, he would have left the meeting thinking he was close to a deal. Instead, he said, "Maria, I want to be direct. I get the sense the number isn't working. Where are we actually?" She paused. Then she told him the truth. They negotiated honestly from there. A deal that would have collapsed quietly 2 weeks later was salvaged in the next 30 minutes. One micro-expression read correctly saved the relationship. How to use it, step by step. Step 1. Watch the face in the first instant. The most revealing nonverbal moment is always the first reaction, before the person composes their response. Train yourself to watch the face before the mouth starts moving. Step 2. Learn the key signals. A few to start. Lip compression equals suppressing a strong emotion, usually anger or disagreement. Genuine versus fake smiles. A genuine smile involves the eyes, crow's feet, raised cheeks. A fake smile does not. Nose wrinkling equals mild disgust. Head tilting equals genuine interest or curiosity. Feet pointing away from you equals desire to leave, even if the face is engaged. Step 3. Cluster, don't isolate. One signal means almost nothing. A cluster of signals, compressed lips, feet pointing away, arms crossed, short responses, tells a clear story. Read patterns, not individual signals. Step 4. Calibrate to the individual. Everyone has behavioral baselines. Learn what this person normally looks like when they are comfortable. Deviations from their baseline are the tells, not deviations from some universal standard. Step 5. When you see a mismatch, name it gently. I want to make sure we're on the same page. Does something feel off? Naming the gap, without accusation, almost always produces honesty. Because people are relieved, often, when someone sees them accurately. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Someone who is reading your nonverbal signals skillfully will ask questions that seem to come from nowhere. Questions that somehow address the exact concern you haven't voiced. They'll also adjust their strategy mid-conversation in response to reactions you didn't know you were showing. If someone seems to know what you're thinking before you say it, they are reading your body language. This is not inherently threatening, but know that your body is communicating to them. Developing emotional composure under pressure will reduce your tells dramatically. Tactic number 7, the contradiction detector. Find the gap between who they claim to be and who they are. What it is. People tell you who they want to be. Their behavior tells you who they actually are. The contradiction detector is the discipline of noticing the gap between these two things, between the values someone proclaims and the choices they make, between the person they perform and the person they reveal under pressure or in private. That gap is not a character flaw to judge. It is critical intelligence. It tells you what someone actually prioritizes, regardless of what they say they prioritize. The psychology behind it. Psychologists call this the intention-behavior gap, the thoroughly documented reality that human beings consistently overestimate the alignment between their values and their actions. We believe we are more generous than we are, more honest, more consistent, more courageous. The brain's self-serving bias protects our self-image by interpreting our behavior charitably and other people's behavior skeptically. What this means is that nearly everyone you will ever meet has a significant gap between the person they describe themselves to be and the person they actually behave as. And that gap is full of useful information. Because what someone does when nobody is watching, when there is no social reward for the virtuous behavior, is who they actually are. That is the person you are actually dealing with. Real life example. Amanda was interviewing candidates for a senior leadership role. One candidate, Tom, spoke eloquently about collaboration, humility, and valuing his team. It was exactly what she wanted to hear. His answers were nearly perfect. Then she did something subtle. At the end of the interview, she excused herself for 5 minutes. leaving Tom with a junior member of her team, someone with no apparent influence over the hiring decision. She watched through the glass panel. Tom, within 90 seconds, had positioned his body away from the junior team member, given him one-word answers to his attempts at conversation, and was visibly impatient. When Amanda returned, Tom was instantly warm, engaged, and collaborative again. The gap was clear. Tom was not humble with people he considered beneath him. He was humble only when it served him. She hired someone else, someone who was just as warm with the junior team member as he was with her, someone whose behavior was consistent because his character was consistent. The contradiction told her everything the interview couldn't. How to use it? Step by step. Step 1. Listen for proclamations. People who frequently tell you their values, who feel the need to announce their honesty, their generosity, their loyalty, are often managing a gap they're aware of. Genuine character rarely announces itself. Step 2. Watch behavior in low-stakes moments. The clearest window into someone's actual character is how they behave when there's nothing to gain. How do they treat servers, assistants, strangers? How do they behave when they think no one important is watching? Step 3. Watch behavior under pressure. Crisis and stress dissolve the perform persona. Who someone becomes when they are afraid, frustrated, or cornered is who they fundamentally are. Watch for this without judgment, but remember it. Step 4. Compare what they say with what they do over time. One-time inconsistencies happen to everyone. Patterns don't lie. If someone repeatedly fails to live up to their proclaimed values, that pattern is the truth. Trust the pattern. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Understand that others are reading your contradictions too. The most dangerous version of this is when someone identifies the gap between your stated values and your behavior and uses it as leverage, either to make you feel guilty and compliant or to quietly discredit you. Be as consistent as you can between who you claim to be and how you actually behave, not for moral reasons alone, but because consistency closes the gap that others can exploit. Tactic number 8. The core wound. Find the old pain that drives all the new behavior. What it is. Beneath every pattern of behavior that puzzles you about another person, there's almost always a core wound. An old, formative experience of pain, rejection, shame, or fear that is never fully healed. The core wound is not an excuse for behavior. It is an explanation for it. And the person who understands another's core wound understands why they do what they do at a level so deep that influencing them becomes almost effortless, because you're no longer speaking to their surface choices. You are speaking to the origin of them, the psychology behind it. Developmental psychology and attachment theory tell us that the experiences of early life, particularly experiences of rejection, abandonment, shame, or powerlessness, create deeply embedded neural pathways that continue to shape behavior throughout adulthood. These are not just memories. They are operational templates, default settings for how to respond to threat, intimacy, authority, rejection, and failure. A person who was chronically criticized as a child will be hypersensitive to any form of disapproval in adulthood. A person who experienced abandonment will either cling compulsively or push people away preemptively to control the moment of loss they already believe is inevitable. A person who is made to feel powerless will seek control obsessively in any environment where they can establish it. These patterns don't hide. Once you know what to look for, they are visible in every relationship, every conflict, every decision. Real-life example. Natalie managed a brilliant but chronically difficult employee named Kevin. Kevin undermined every initiative she proposed. He was cynical, resistant, and seemed to derive energy from disagreement. Most managers would have documented his performance and moved toward termination. Natalie chose differently. She spent time simply paying attention to Kevin over several weeks. She noticed that Kevin's resistance was most intense whenever a decision was made without consulting him, even when the decision was minor. He didn't object to the outcome nearly as much as he objected to the process of exclusion. One conversation gave her the peace she needed. Kevin mentioned, almost in passing, that he'd spent his entire childhood being the last to know anything. His parents' divorce, financial problems, family decisions. He'd been a child kept systematically outside the circle of information and power. The exclusion was his wound. The controlling behavior in adulthood was the scar over it. Natalie began consulting Kevin, genuinely, not performatively, before implementing changes that affected his work. Within 3 months, his resistance had transformed into the most vocal advocacy on the team. The wound, acknowledged indirectly, had stopped driving the behavior. How to use it? Step by step. Step 1. Trace the disproportionate reactions. Where does someone consistently overreact? Where is their emotional response bigger than the situation seems to warrant? That disproportionality almost always points to an old wound being reactivated. Step 2. Look for the themes. Core wounds tend to organize around a small number of themes: abandonment, rejection, powerlessness, shame, betrayal, invisibility. Ask yourself, which of these themes appears most consistently in this person's emotional flashpoints? Step 3. Listen to their history stories. People reveal their wounds in the stories they tell about their past, particularly the ones they tell repeatedly. The recurring story is almost always the wound in narrative form. Step 4. Address the wound indirectly. Never name someone's core wound to their face unless you have a deeply trusted relationship and explicit permission. To most people, naming the wound feels like exposure, and exposure triggers defense. Instead, address it behaviorally. Give the abandoned person consistency. Give the shamed person genuine, private recognition. Give the powerless person a real voice. Heal the wound with action, not diagnosis. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Be deeply wary of people who seem to understand your childhood pain with suspicious accuracy, who somehow know exactly where your wounds are and speak to them with precision. This level of understanding, when genuine, is a gift. When weaponized, it is among the most dangerous forms of manipulation that exists, because it bypasses every defense you have. If someone's comfort and understanding seems too perfectly calibrated to your deepest insecurities, ask yourself what they want access to. Not everyone who sees your wound wants to heal it. Tactic number 9, the desire blueprint. Map what they want more than they'll admit. What is? There are the desires people announce, and there are the desires they carry quietly, the ones too embarrassing or too revealing to voice aloud. The desire blueprint is the practice of mapping both layers, the stated desires and the hidden ones. Because the hidden desires are almost always the more powerful drivers of behavior. And the person who can speak to those hidden desires, without forcing the other person to name them, holds a key that most people never even knew existed. The psychology behind it. Human beings are deeply social creatures with powerful concerns about how they are perceived. This means that many of our most genuine desires get filtered, suppressed, or disguised before they ever reach the surface, because acknowledging them feels vulnerable, socially unacceptable, or self-indulgent. The person who craves fame but calls it wanting to make an impact. The person who wants revenge but describes it as seeking accountability. The person who desperately wants to be loved but frames it as just wanting mutual respect. The person who wants power but tells themselves and everyone else that they're just trying to help. These reframings are not dishonest, exactly. They are the mind's way of making desire respectable. But the original desire is still operating underneath, driving decisions with full force. When you speak to the real desire, the one beneath the polished version, you create a feeling of being profoundly understood. And profound understanding is the foundation of profound trust. Real-life example. A nonprofit organization was struggling to get a major donation from a wealthy local businessman named Harold. He had the money. He had vague interest in their cause. But every conversation left him politely non-committal. Their fundraising director, Priya, decided to watch Harold at 2 public events before approaching him again. What she saw: Harold photographed himself at every opportunity. He referenced his legacy, what he was building, what he wanted to leave behind, in nearly every conversation. He lit up when someone mentioned that the community would remember a contribution he had made years ago. Harold's stated desire: to support worthy causes. Harold's real desire: to be remembered, to matter beyond his own lifetime. Priya restructured the pitch entirely. She didn't talk about the cause. She talked about naming, about the Harold Chin Community Education Center, about what it would mean for his name to be woven into this neighborhood for generations. He wrote the check at the next meeting. The cause mattered to him, but the legacy mattered more. Nobody had bothered to see it before Priya did. How to use it? Step by step. Step 1. Listen for the desire beneath the desire. When someone tells you what they want, ask yourself, what would having that give them? Status? Love? Security? Freedom? That deeper answer is the real desire. Keep drilling down. What would that give them? Until you hit something that feels fundamental. Step 2. Notice what lights them up unexpectedly. Hidden desires announce themselves through disproportionate enthusiasm. When someone becomes suddenly animated, suddenly more alive, something real has been touched. Note it. Step 3. Watch what they consume, display, and collect. People's environments are maps of their real desires. The books someone displays, the photos on their desk, the things they talk about when they're relaxed and not performing. All of it is data. Step 4. Give them a path to the real desire without making them say it. This is the art. You don't say, I know you actually want recognition. You simply structure your offer so that accepting it delivers the real desire alongside the stated one. They get what they said they wanted, and they get what they actually wanted, and they don't have to admit the second part to anyone, including themselves. Step 5. Never expose the hidden desire publicly. The hidden desire is private precisely because it is vulnerable. Exposing it in front of others is a betrayal. It will not be forgiven. Keep what you know to yourself, and use it only to give, not to display your insight or to leverage the person. Warning: how to recognize when it's used against you. Examine the moments when someone seems to offer you exactly what you secretly want. Recognition you've never asked for, belonging you've been craving, power that aligns perfectly with an ambition you haven't voiced. Ask yourself, how do they know? Is this genuine perception and generosity? Or have they mapped your hidden desires and are now using them to create a debt, an obligation that they will call on later? The gift that perfectly matches your secret longing is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a hook. Part 1 has given you the eyes. You can now read the room, read the person, read the hunger and the fear and the wound and the desire that most people spend their entire lives invisible to. But reading is only the beginning. Part 2 is where the real power begins. Now you learn to control the conversation itself.